They showed up calling themselves HOA enforcers. Flashy badges, combat boots, full-on tough guy performance right on my doorstep. Claimed they had the authority to search our home. Only problem, we don't even belong to an HOA. And the kicker, they had zero idea who my wife really was. What happened next still flashes through my mind every time I see her out front, casually tending to her petunias like none of it ever went down. I mean, what do you do when bogus authority rolls up with real aggression? Would you have cracked open the door? Or gone straight for your phone? Seriously, tell me in the comments what you would have done. Here's how it all started. It was one of those calm Tuesday afternoons in our sleepy little suburban bubble, the kind of neighborhood where the biggest issue is someone forgetting trash pickup day. I'm Malcolm, by the way, 40 years old, teach high school civics, and fix security gear on the side. Not exactly a life of danger, and that's how I prefer it. Claire and I have been married 5 years. She's the gentlest soul I know, always in the garden or buried in a whodunit. She's 45, retired from some mysterious federal gig she never really talks about, and the kind of person who starts her morning with a 3-mile jog and ends it elbow deep in soil or curled up with a paperback. Anyway, there I was at the kitchen table, grading civics tests, which turned out to be pretty ironic, given what happened next. That's when we heard it, not a knock, but hard, aggressive pounding, on the front door, like someone wanted to break it in. Claire had just returned from her run, still in workout clothes, pouring herself a glass of water. We exchanged that silent look couples share when something feels off. I moved to get the door, but Claire was already closer. She beat me to it. I don't even know why I didn't insist. Maybe I was too wrapped up in the test papers. Or maybe, deep down, I sensed she could handle whatever was waiting out there better than I could. When she opened the door, 3 men were standing on our porch in what looked like official uniforms, sunlight bouncing off their badges. The guy in front had that faux authority vibe, his name tag read Gary. He gave off heavy mall cop energy, barking orders like he thought he was the real deal. Ma'am, we're with HOA enforcement. We're conducting a mandatory inspection. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can make things difficult. He spoke like he had some kind of legal superpower. The other 2 stood silently behind him, trying their best to look threatening, and honestly, it might have worked on me. I'm a teacher, not a brawler, but Claire. She stood there completely unfazed, studying them like they were peculiar bugs on a windowsill. I think you're mistaken, she replied, calm and firm, the way she talks when someone clearly has their facts wrong. Our property isn't under any HOA. We've got the paperwork if you'd like to take a look. Now, any rational person would have apologized for the mix-up and backed off. But Gary wasn't rational. He doubled down, stepping closer and raising his voice. We have jurisdiction in this neighborhood. Cooperate, or things get complicated. I stood frozen, torn. Should I be filming this, calling someone? Claire remained composed, even as their energy shifted toward hostility. Something about her posture told me she wasn't worried, and that maybe, just maybe, I shouldn't be either. Then Gary made his biggest blunder. He stepped onto our property without permission. The other 2 followed, closing in. Listen, lady, he sneered. We're coming in whether you like it or not. We've got reports of violations, and we're authorized to search the premises. He was smirking like he was intimidating some harmless suburban housewife. Claire blinked, and shifted back, not in fear, but like she was sizing them up. She moved 1 step back. Something in her body language changed. Not dramatic, subtle, almost invisible, but I noticed. She didn't look like my flower-loving wife anymore. Something else took her place, something sharp and dangerous, that instantly set off every instinct I had. Before Gary could finish his sentence, Claire twisted his wrist at the joint and sidestepped him. The second guy went down with a knee to the gut. The third hesitated, just long enough for her to sweep his legs from under him like a scene straight out of a spy flick. 3 men, puffed up and full of bluster, now groaning in a heap on our porch. It all happened so fast I barely saw it. Gary clutched his wrist, one of the others curled up in pain, the last one flat on his back, blinking at the sky like he couldn't figure out how he got there. Claire pulled out her phone with the same calm she uses when checking the weather. 911, she said. I need to report 3 individuals impersonating law enforcement attempting illegal entry. Her voice, smooth, steady, like she hadn't just taken down 3 grown men by herself. I've been married to her 5 years, thought I knew everything. Her favorite blend of coffee, her daily habits, that little tune she hums while pruning roses. But watching her move, I realized there was a whole side of her I'd never seen. For 5 years, I believed I'd married a quiet reader who loved petunias. Turns out I'd married the kind of woman mystery novels are written about. And while a part of me was fascinated to uncover more, another part wondered just how deep that rabbit hole went. The real police showed up not long after, 2 officers, calm and competent, the kind of presence that made Gary's get-up look like Halloween. They slowed when they took in the scene. 3 grown men laid out, 1 small woman standing tall. The older cop, silver hair and sharp eyes, approached Claire carefully. "Mom, could you tell us what happened here?" He sounded polite, but cautious, like he wasn't sure if Claire was the victim or the threat. Gary, meanwhile, tried to spin the story. "I was assaulted while conducting official HOA business." He groaned, still waving that fake badge. "This woman attacked us for no reason." He actually had the gall to play the victim, as if he hadn't been the one barking threats and barging in. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but honestly, I was nervous. What if the officers believed him? What if we ended up cuffed on our own porch? Then something unexpected happened. The older officer gave Claire a long, assessing look. Something shifted in his expression. "Forgive me for asking, ma'am," he said slowly, "but do you have any experience in law enforcement? The way you handled this ... He trailed off, waiting. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather wallet I'd never seen before, opened it and flashed something to the officer. I couldn't see what it was, but I saw his reaction. The man straightened instantly, like he'd just been saluted. Whatever was in that wallet, it flipped the whole situation on its head. His tone changed to one of respect. "We'll take it from here, ma'am," he said. "These gentlemen are coming with us for questioning, and just like that, no more suspicion, no more probing questions." The other officer began helping Gary and his crew to their feet while the senior one pulled Claire aside for a quiet word. I couldn't hear most of it, but I caught a few fragments. "Appreciate your restraint." They clearly had no idea. Suddenly, the police were treating Claire like one of their own. And I stood there, completely lost. What was in that badge holder? What did it mean? Why had everything changed the moment they saw it? Claire acted like nothing unusual had happened, like this was just another Tuesday. Like getting confronted by fake cops and fending them off was part of the weekly routine. As Gary was being loaded into the back of the squad car, I overheard the older officer murmuring to his partner. I was close enough to catch it. Former Fed, FBI background. Gary heard it too. The blood drained from his face. He finally realized exactly who he'd picked a fight with. You could literally watch the moment it dawned on him. That instant of clarity when he realized he'd just tried to strong-arm a federal agent. "FBI, she's with the FBI. We just tried to intimidate an actual federal agent." His voice cracked, like he was back in high school. All that fake confidence evaporated in an instant. The officer helping him into the squad car just shook his head. "Former FBI. But yes," he muttered. "You boys definitely picked the wrong house today. I wish I could say I played it cool, but honestly, my jaw was probably somewhere near the floor." FBI, my soft-spoken, plant-loving wife used to work for the FBI. After the officers hauled Gary and his cosplay law enforcement crew away, I turned to Claire, my head spinning with 1,000 questions. But I didn't even get the first one out. Our phone rang. Claire picked it up, and the change in her tone told me right away this was not a casual call. "This is Deborah from the Willowbrook HOA," came a cold, measured voice through the speakerphone. Claire had switched it on, so I could hear every word. "I heard about what happened today. Gary shared some rather surprising information about your wife's background." There was a shift in her tone, something beyond irritation, concern. Real, nervous concern, like she was probing to find out just how deep the water was. "And what exactly did Gary tell you, Deborah?" Claire replied, calm but firm. There was steel in her voice, even as she sounded perfectly composed, and Deborah definitely noticed. She hesitated before replying. "He mentioned some federal ties. Former law enforcement, maybe? That does make things ... complicated." The way she emphasized complicated made it clear this was no longer about minor neighborhood grievances. Claire said nothing, didn't confirm or deny anything. And somehow, that silence hit harder than any words could. Even over the phone, you could feel the shift in control. Well, regardless of her past, Deborah finally said, her voice noticeably less confident, "You're still accountable too. Community standards. We'll see just how far those connections go." It was meant to be a warning, but it sounded more like someone bluffing on a bad hand. After Claire ended the call, she didn't say a word. Just stared at the phone like she was studying a chessboard where she already saw 10 moves ahead. Then, she looked at me with an expression I didn't recognize. "Babe, I think tomorrow's going to get interesting." Part of me was genuinely intrigued to see what she'd do. But another part of me started to question whether I was ready to find out who my wife really was. Honestly, I still didn't know if I should be impressed or alarmed. The next morning, I found a thick, official-looking envelope in our mailbox. No postmark, no delivery slip, just sitting there like someone had hand-placed it sometime in the night. Inside was a notice from the HOA, accusing us of violating lawn regulations. Supposedly, our grass was too long and didn't meet community standards. I had mowed 2 days earlier. Measured the blades with a ruler. I teach civics, I follow rules like scripture. But apparently, our yard was now a threat to neighborhood property values. The document came on fancy letterhead, full of legal-sounding jargon designed to intimidate. And for most people, it probably would have worked, but not for someone married to a woman who used to investigate scams like this for a living. Claire read through it and honest to God laughed. First time I'd seen her actually amused since this whole situation kicked off. "They're going with the slow bleed strategy," she said, shaking her head, almost like she admired the technique. "Classic intimidation play, bury you in bureaucracy until you cave." She pointed out phrases crafted to sound official but meant nothing. "See this part about municipal compliance standards? That doesn't exist. There's no such ordinance for private lawns at the county level." Watching her break it down like a case file was both impressive and mildly unsettling. But the humor didn't last long. Over the next 3 days, more notices came. One each morning, each more absurd than the last. A parking violation for parking in our driveway. A curtain color violation because apparently beige wasn't the right beige. And my favorite. A garden infraction for Claire's flower varieties not being HOA-approved. That was just the beginning. Then came the avalanche of nonsense. Mailbox spacing that was too irregular, and unauthorized shade of house trim, non-harmonious seasonal decorations, even her prized roses she tended to every weekend like they were her children were suddenly classified as a violation. I was fuming, but Claire changed. By the fourth notice, the laughter was gone. She stood silent, just staring at the paper, not angry, at least not visibly. Her face hardened, and I saw something new in her eyes. Not rage, something colder, more calculating. Each letter carried steeper penalties. $50, $100, $200, $500, and always with stern warnings about legal consequences if we didn't pay within exactly 7 days. The presentation was professional, the language convincing. If you didn't know better, it would seem entirely legit. And that, I realized, was the whole point. They weren't enforcing rules. They were manufacturing authority, a psychological war, fought with paperwork. I pulled up the HOA charter and scanned through every bylaw. Nothing, not a single one of these notices held up. That's when it hit me, this wasn't enforcement. It was bureaucratic warfare. I started venting loudly. "This is harassment. They're faking legal authority. How is this even allowed? Where's the oversight?" I was pacing the kitchen, waving the papers in the air. Claire, meanwhile, slipped away into her home office and returned with a file I'd never seen before. Labeled County Archive 950 Boundary Maps. She opened it like it was a sacred text, faded documents, almost illegible. "Malcolm," she called from the other room, her voice firm but calm. "I need every document we have on this house, purchase records, property deeds, all of it." There was something in her voice that cut through my ranting. Not harsh, but commanding in a way I didn't question. I spent the next hour pulling every record we had while she made calls, speaking in a tone that was clinical and precise. Her voice sounded almost foreign, measured, exact, authoritative. What we found confirmed what Claire already suspected. Our neighborhood wasn't even within the HOA's legal boundaries. not just barely out miles out. The original 1995 charter placed their authority ending 3 blocks away. They had zero jurisdiction here, and never did. Then Claire pulled up county GIS data. 2 maps appeared, one official, one submitted by the HOA, the second one included 5 extra block hours among them. She dug into public records and found clear signs this had been happening. For years, they had been illegally expanding their domain, adding entire neighborhoods to their maps that they had no legal right to govern. Someone had doctored the official filings. They picked the wrong neighborhood, Claire said, eyes locked on the documents, and they definitely chose the wrong house. The quiet certainty in her voice made my stomach tighten. This was no longer about us. This was about something much bigger. She sorted the files into a series of clean stacks, building what looked like a legal case. I watched her methodical precision and realized I was seeing a part of her I never knew existed. Was I relieved? Or should I be scared? But one thing was clear. Claire wasn't just some retired Fed. She knew how to handle this kind of organized abuse, and she was getting ready to fight back. She told me she was going to attend the next Hideaway HOA meeting. The way she said it, there was no room for discussion. It's time to handle this the right way. And in public. I always knew she was capable. After all, I'd seen her disable 3 grown men like it was nothing. But watching her prepare to walk into that room full of smug, hostile people, I realized I'd never truly seen her in what she called work mode. That morning, she prepped for hours, printing documents, sorting them, rehearsing a presentation. But it wasn't just the paperwork that caught my attention. It was her. The Claire I knew, the gardening, lavender planting Claire was gone. In her place stood a woman I barely recognized, dressed in a sharp business suit I didn't even know she owned, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, every step radiating quiet power. She adjusted her collar with surgical focus. She practiced her statements in front of the mirror, her voice shifting from gentle to commanding like flipping a switch. "This is how you control a hostile room," she told me when she saw me watching. "Don't show hesitation. Own the space from the second you walk in." Right before we left, I asked, "Are you sure this isn't too much?" Her eyes didn't waver. "Too much is what they've been doing for weeks. I'm just leveling the field." The community center was packed. Around 40 residents, all crowded into rows of metal folding chairs. Apparently, these meetings were part governance, part spectator sport. At the front sat Deborah and her board, all in matching blazers like they were about to host a game show. The moment Deborah spotted Claire, she smiled, a smug, self-satisfied grin. You could tell she thought this would be a public takedown. Deborah opened the meeting by talking about troublesome residents who refused to comply with community rules. She never said our names, but she stared at Claire the whole time. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. Some folks seemed to believe they were somehow exempt from the very guidelines that help keep our neighborhood pleasant, she said, her lips stretched in that practiced smile, every syllable laced with smug superiority. "Thankfully, we have reliable measures for handling that mindset. Our enforcement process is comprehensive, entirely lawful, and specifically structured to safeguard the property values we all work tirelessly to uphold." From the back of the room, someone muttered, "This is getting strange." Another resident squirmed slightly, perhaps sensing their turn might be coming. The implied threats weren't lost on anyone. It was written on every face in the room. I noticed people shifting, uneasy, like they didn't know whether to be more disturbed by Deborah's tone or by the fear that they might be next. Claire, meanwhile, remained completely composed through the entire meeting, scribbling notes into a little notebook I'd never noticed her use before. She sat silent and still, never reacting, not once interrupting. It felt like watching a seasoned chess master let her opponent move every piece before unveiling her plan. When Deborah finally opened the floor for questions, Claire rose with a self-assurance that reminded me of those intense courtroom dramas. The room fell utterly silent. You could almost hear people holding their breath. Claire didn't need to raise her voice. Instead, she calmly placed the original property map onto the table, and the impact was immediate. Then came the county's original records, official copies of the untouched boundary lines, along with evidence exposing the illegal attempts at property expansion. No theatrics. Just a quiet, deliberate presentation, like an attorney laying out an airtight argument, which, in hindsight, might be exactly what she was doing. As the documents landed on the table, Deborah's expression shifted instantly. The smugness evaporated. replaced by something closer to panic. Her voice wavered ever so slightly, and her hand hovered nervously near her water bottle but never touched it. "Where did you even get those? How did you?" she stammered, unable to complete the sentence. Likely because reality was setting in, Claire, unfazed, responded in an even tone, "Public records, available to any citizen who knows how to access them correctly." Her voice carried the weight of a civics lesson, but beneath the polite delivery, there was steel. And everyone could feel it. A murmur swept through the crowd. People began pulling out their phones to document the moment. The atmosphere had shifted sharply. Deborah could feel the walls closing in. Then something unexpected happened. An older man in the last row stood slowly and said, "They did the same thing to my family 2 years ago. Said we had to join or face legal threats." His voice trembled, but the resolve behind it was clear. It was like he'd been waiting for someone to break the silence first, then others followed. Voices rose around the room as people began recounting their own experiences with Deborah's relentless overreach. "They told us our fence was illegal," a woman said. "We paid $300 for a permit that turned out we didn't even need." The floodgates had opened. One brave voice turned into many. Deborah's grip on the meeting slipped completely. Her face flushed deeper shades of red as she struggled to retain command. Her hands shook as she barked an order for the community center security to escort Claire out, insisting the meeting was for HOA members only. Claire didn't even blink. "State law requires these meetings to remain open to all residents affected by HOA decisions," she said, still calm. "Would you like me to quote the statute?" No one mistook that for a bluff. Deborah's illusion of power crumbled, and she knew it. Her reaction was pure desperation. She stormed out of the meeting, but not before pausing by Claire's seat to hiss, "You don't have the slightest idea who you're dealing with." And honestly, that's the moment I had to ask myself, would you keep pressing forward or pull back before this spiraled further? I was torn. Part of me wanted to see where this led, but I also worried we were provoking something dangerous. As I watched Deborah leave, her face twisted with fury and defeat, I knew this battle was far from over. But when I turned to Claire and saw her answering residents' questions, calm and composed, it occurred to me, maybe we were more prepared than I realized. A week later, my world shifted. I was in the teacher's lounge during lunch, grading assignments, and trying to forget about HOA drama, when the principal summoned me to his office. That walk down the hallway felt endless, even as an adult. Getting called to the principal's office makes your stomach knot. Double quotes, "Malcolm, we've received several formal complaints about your teaching methods. You're being suspended pending an investigation," he told me. I sat in stunned silence, blinking like a fish out of water. 5 years teaching without a single incident, and now, suddenly, 3 parents were accusing me of spreading anti-authority views in class. The timing couldn't have been more obvious. Sitting across from him, I read the complaints. My pulse pounded as I saw the wild accusations. One claimed I was teaching students to disrespect community leaders. Another accused me of promoting civil disobedience. The wording was eerily similar, like it all came from the same script. Mr. Henderson looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Malcolm. We're required to act when complaints are filed. The parents are threatening to go to the board." He didn't seem to buy any of it himself, but he was boxed in by district policy. All 3 complaints came from families inside Deborah's HOA, filed on the same day. Phrased almost identically. It was like someone handed them a template and told them to fill in the blanks. And sure, I teach civics. Yes, I tell students to understand their rights and ask questions. That's literally the point. But now, teaching kids about the Constitution was being painted as subversive. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but as I sat there facing suspension for simply doing my job, laughing felt out of reach. When I got home and told Claire, she didn't say a word. She just sat there, holding her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles turned pale, staring out the window in absolute silence for 10 straight minutes. I had never seen her like that. Her breathing stayed steady, but her jaw was clenched tight, like she was grinding her teeth behind the calm. I was pacing, ranting, flailing my arms. But she remained still, like the eye of a growing storm. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was like ice. "They made this personal, Malcolm. That was their biggest mistake." It gave me goosebumps. Not because I feared her, but because I suddenly feared what anyone who had crossed her might be about to face. She stood, walked out of the kitchen, and shut the office door behind her. The air changed. For hours, I didn't see her, only heard the clicking of keys, the clipped rhythm of authoritative phone calls. I stood in the hallway, listening. I didn't recognize the voice on the other side. It was cool, commanding, full of terms I couldn't follow: federal jurisdiction, civil rights pattern, oversight documentation. It was like overhearing a foreign language, where I knew every word, just not what they meant strung together. Eventually, she called me in. She showed me a formal federal complaint, not just against the HOA, but personally naming Deborah for abuse of power and targeted harassment. It was meticulous, full of timelines, witness reports, legal precedent I'd never heard of. It looked like a legal brief drafted by a team. She had done it in one afternoon. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said. "I found 6 other families who were targeted the same way. This is systemic harassment, and now it's on record." She showed me a chart she'd created, a pattern of abuse that made it undeniable. Watching her work, it hit me. Claire wasn't reacting blindly. She was moving like someone who'd done this before. This wasn't new to her, this was what she used to do. That night, she made one final phone call, and left the door open this time. "It's Claire. Remember that HOA corruption case from 5 years ago? I just found another one. This one's personal." Whoever was on the line must have responded positively, because she smiled, not with joy, but with quiet resolve. The kind of smile you see just before a predator pounces. They don't know what they've started, but they're about to find out. "I'll have everything on your desk by morning. Would you step in, or trust your partner to handle something like this?" I'd always been the fixer, but watching Claire take over, focused, precise, I realized this was beyond me. She wasn't just the woman who gardened on weekends anymore. She'd become something else entirely. And maybe that's exactly what we needed. A week later, unmarked sedans began showing up in our neighborhood. No flashing lights, no sirens, just low-profile cars with government plates and agents who looked like anyone else, quietly talking to neighbors. Most residents had no clue they were speaking to investigators. But I did. Claire had prepped me for this. She said real federal work happens in silence, no drama, just steady, deliberate fact-finding. What I hadn't expected was how fast everything would escalate once her contacts took over. Deborah still seemed to believe she was untouchable, acting like Claire was just some former desk clerk. I heard her at the grocery store boasting that she'd handled worse before. That one ex-government worker couldn't scare her, but she was wrong. Dead wrong. The level of arrogance was honestly astonishing. Here was a woman who had essentially taunted a lion, yet behaved like she'd swatted a mosquito. Meanwhile, Gary, recently released on bail, was growing more unhinged by the day. At the grocery store, he kept nervously scanning the aisles, as if federal agents might leap out from behind the breakfast cereal. "You don't get it," he'd mutter to anyone who made eye contact, his voice rising with every sentence. "She took out 3 of us like it was nothing, and the police treated her like some kind of VIP. She's not normal." But Deborah just brushed off his panic with her usual smugness. "Gary, stop being so dramatic. So what if she has a government pension? That doesn't mean anything. We're the ones with actual authority here, and I'm not going to let some retired bureaucrat scare me off." The confidence in her voice was so unwavering. It was clear she had no clue what kind of expertise she was going up against. Gary did his best to warn her, but Deborah was far too wrapped up in her own self-importance to hear it. "I've managed this HOA for 8 years, she said during a conversation I overheard at the post office. "I know how to deal with troublemakers. I'm not backing down just because someone claims they have ties to the government." The gap between her assuredness and the real danger she faced would have been funny if it weren't about to completely upend her life. It wasn't until about a week into the federal investigation that Claire finally opened up about her background. During a quiet dinner, of all times, I had been working up the courage to ask about what the officer had hinted at, but she must have sensed it, because she just calmly said, "I guess I should probably tell you what I actually did for the FBI." She paused for a second and added, "My specialty was investigating this exact kind of thing. HOA scams, fake legal power, financial exploitation of residents." I literally stopped mid-bite. The chicken in my mouth suddenly tasted like cardboard. I struggled to swallow. "Wait. You meant this specifically, HOAs were your area. She nodded like it was nothing. 22 years in the Bureau, Civil Rights Division, Community Fraud Task Force. I've shut down dozens of operations just like Deborah's. Retired 3 years before I met you because I thought I'd left that world behind. She kept cutting her chicken as though we were talking about weekend plans, not her history dismantling organized corruption. But I guess that world isn't done with me. Hearing her say it so casually drove home the truth. This wasn't just neighborhood drama. This was a federal case involving deep-rooted fraud. And Claire wasn't just a victim standing her ground. She was a seasoned expert in precisely this crime. She dismantled HOA fraud rings worth millions. Crimes dressed up as neighborhood management, fear masked as order. Deborah had no idea she was dealing with someone who literally wrote the book on dismantling operations like hers. That's when it finally hit Gary. I'll never forget the panic in his voice when he called Deborah. I looked her up, he told her, breathless. She's not just ex-FBI. She's the one who brought down the Riverside HOA scam 5 years ago. 15 years in federal prison, Deborah. Later, Gary played me the recording, and for the first time since this all began, I heard actual fear in Deborah's voice. Wait, what exactly are we dealing with here? She asked, her voice cracking as the truth started to break her composure. We picked a fight with someone who wrote the manual on prosecuting HOA fraud, Gary said, his voice trembling. We're in real trouble, Deborah. Serious, federal prison-level trouble. The call lasted another 10 minutes. Gary begged her to step away, but Deborah clung to her fantasy that her pretend authority would protect her somehow. But Claire told me the investigators had already uncovered widespread fraud, fake notices, unauthorized fines, money going directly into personal accounts instead of HOA use, and it wasn't limited to our neighborhood. Other communities where Deborah had been involved were now part of the growing case. She's been running this con for 8 years, Claire said, showing me an evidence chart that looked like something out of a crime show. The total was already over $200,000 and climbing. As the truth spread, Deborah became more desperate, shredding files, insisting everything was above board. But it was far too late. Claire's contacts already had duplicates of every fake map, forged citation, and bank statements showing how the money had been misused. Victims started speaking up. Families demanding refunds, others considering legal action. Some had paid thousands over the years, believing they had no choice. Mrs. Patterson, just a few houses away, had shelled out $1,200 in bogus fees. The Johnsons had been harassed over imaginary landscaping violations. Watching Claire calmly explain legal rights to confused neighbors made it clear why she'd been so successful in her career. She wasn't just standing up for us, she was shielding the whole community. That evening, the final coordination call came. We've got everything. Arrest scheduled for tomorrow morning. Claire's reply was simple. Good. Time to finish this the right way. That night, I lay awake thinking. I really had no idea who I married. And I wasn't sure I was ready for how this story would end. At 6 a.m. sharp, federal agents and local police showed up at both Deborah's house and the HOA office. It looked like something out of a movie, except it was happening right here, in our quiet suburb. From the window, I watched unmarked vehicles circle the office 3 blocks away. And honestly, it felt incredibly satisfying watching their pretend power collapse under the weight of real justice. The agents moved with exacting coordination, some securing the perimeter, others stepping forward with search and arrest warrants. Gary was arrested at his apartment. According to the report, he was caught trying to flush documents when they knocked. The image of this self-styled tough guy desperately trying to destroy evidence in his bathroom was almost poetic. That's when he finally realized this was no bluff. When they introduced Claire as the consulting expert, Deborah's expression shifted through a slideshow of disbelief, shock, denial, fury, panic, then a kind of hollow resignation. You were FBI this whole time, she whispered. The complaints, the notices, you were building a case. Her voice broke on the word case, her hands trembled. Claire didn't gloat. She just answered plainly, I gave you the chance to walk away. You escalated. These are the consequences. The way she said it, steady, matter-of-fact, was more devastating than yelling could have ever been. Gary, now in cuffs, stared at Deborah, pale and drenched in sweat. Told you she wasn't normal, he muttered. We should have left her alone. His voice was barely audible, like someone realizing, too late, just how badly they'd screwed up. But Deborah was still struggling to grasp it all. You were just a neighbor, a gardener. How were we supposed to know? The desperation in her voice was almost pitiful. She kept looking around for some miracle. But none came. Claire's final words to them still echo in my head. That's the point. You thought you could push anyone around because you assumed you had authority. And that assumption just cost you everything. The silence afterward felt like a verdict. And what really struck me was Claire's calmness, not angry, not vengeful. Just professional. To her, this was just another case. And they were now just another example of what happens when power is abused by people who never had it in the first place. That same day, my school principal called. They were dropping every investigation. I was reinstated immediately, with full back pay and a public apology. Turns out when the FBI's investigating your accusers, people start rethinking their complaints, he said, clearly embarrassed. He even offered me a commendation for defending constitutional education in the face of community pressure. A little dramatic, maybe, but appreciated. The remaining HOA board held an emergency vote and unanimously decided to dissolve the entire leadership. Mrs. Chen from down the block even asked Claire if she'd consider helping rebuild the group. We need people who know the law and actually care about doing right by residents. Claire politely declined. Thank you, but I think your leadership should come from within. I'll happily offer legal advice if you ever need it, but this is your community. You should run it. A brand new HOA was formed, this time with real legal boundaries, transparent books, and an actual commitment to service. Within months, the group transformed from a threat into a unifier. Refunds were issued from the seized accounts. Families got back thousands they thought they'd never see again. The Johnsons were reimbursed over $2,000. Mrs. Patterson paid off overdue medical bills. Half a year later, our neighborhood feels like a whole new place. The HOA now hosts block parties, maintains public spaces, and helps people connect instead of control them. Claire replanted the flower bed that first earned her a violation. This time, she grinned, I'm planting exactly what I want. It's our yard, and it never belonged to their little fiefdom. She picked the wildest, most disorderly flowers she could find, ones that would have given Deborah heart palpitations. The story went viral. Federal probe uncovers HOA fraud ring. Other neighborhoods reached out with similar concerns. Claire consulted on a few of them. Deborah was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and ordered to repay $150,000. Gary got 18 months and community service. Their HOA was legally shut down, and their authority permanently revoked. What began as a petty power trip ended up becoming an example of how neighborhoods can work together for something better, and I realized my sweet, quiet wife who loves her garden and mystery novels spent her life defending ordinary people from the very abuse we faced. Honestly, it made me admire her even more. What I really learned. You don't need to be married to an FBI agent. You just need to know your rights and have the guts to stand up for them. Because when regular people stand their ground, you'd be amazed what they can accomplish. Claire's back to her flowers and her paperbacks. But these days, neighbors often stop by to ask legal questions, and she's always happy to help. Turns out, the quietest people are sometimes the strongest, and the biggest bullies can reveal what we're really made of. If this story stuck with you, I'd love to hear your take. What would you have done if a bunch of fake officials showed up at your door? Ever been strong-armed by someone pretending to be in charge? Drop your experience in the comments. I read them all. And hey, if this made you smile, or even just made you think, you can hit the like or thanks button. It really helps keep these stories going. Take care of your peace, and I'll catch you in the next one.